Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Dirt podcast. I'm Hunter Slifka and this is Neil Schaefer. It seems like it's been a little bit since we've done an episode here, but tell you what, we have been busier than busy. A lot of times you think of the end of the year, you start getting some snow on the ground starts freezing up. You start to think that things slow down. That's definitely not the case. If anything, I think it's got even busier than what it's been, even during construction season. These last couple weeks have been really a big push on trying to get a lot of paperwork done, trying to get reports moving, finished. There's a lot of things that go into those reports that you got to kind of tidy up and make sure you get your I's dotted and T's crossed and stuff like that. But one of the more important things that we've been working on, I would say, and it's going to lead down the road to more conservation success, is gathering a ton of applications to our federal programs, and one in particular is the CSP program. And we're going to take a stab at it. Come on, Neil. Drum roll.
Conservation Security
Ding,
Program.
ding, 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 ding.
I've been practicing that acronym. I will, just to remind everybody, when it first came out, it was called Conservation Stewardship Program, and for whatever reason, I have no idea, they changed it to Conservation Security Program. Well, acronym was the same, CSP.
And nothing really changed.
Nothing really changed. I don't understand why they did that. It's just confusing for me.
I think someone in a black tuxedo down in Washington, D.C. probably said, hey, I want to change this name, and my name's going to be on that bill or on that reason why.
Yeah, probably.
Oh well, not a big deal. But anyways, the CSP program is a pretty cool program. It differs from the EQIP program because it's more of like that all-inclusive program where it will give you actually a payment for what you're doing on your working ground, even if maybe it's not a direct task or a direct implementation of some sort of practice that you would have to do. And we'll get into some of those different enhancements that help build your payment or build your contract up. But nonetheless, it's a program that started out many years ago, and I'll let Neil kind of talk about it because he was there a lot longer than I am and can definitely explain it a lot better. But there was priority areas that kind of had eligible areas that when it initially kind of started up, and since then it's kind of obviously built from them and expanded and definitely became a great program to utilize and a great outlet for our farmers to jump in that doesn't just focus on one specific thing.
Yeah, the CSP has really been a game changer for the NRCS agency. Prior to that, we had the EQIP program, but mostly we weren't doing we were doing a lot of stuff, ag waste and once in a while waterway and stuff. But when CSP came in, that was huge. And I forget which farm bill it came in with. It was one of the ones in the mid 2000s. And like Hunter said, it was now a program for working ground. We got CRP, which is reserve ground, and that's when we put it into reserve. Working ground that is reserved, put in kind of a retirement for a period of time. But CSP was a whole lot different. And the uniqueness of what happened here in Howard County, they, just like almost every federal program, they roll it out as a pilot. And they selected it by watersheds, which this was another new, they had never done this before, doing projects by watershed in the NRCS. So the pilot ones that were selected in that first round, like in mid 2000, was the Turkey River watershed was one, and the Wapsipinicon was the other. Well, that's 2/3 of Howard County. Unfortunately, my watershed project was Staff and Beaver project across the north in the Upper Iowa River. But once that initial rounds got going, and they were 5 or 10 year contracts to begin with, I was working with my producers up there, just saying, hey, down the road, I know you're not eligible for now, but I think this might be coming your way, and it eventually did. But once I went to a lot of the state planning meetings. They were held regionally, and my DC Lori at the time, her and I went to a lot of those. And Tom O'Connor was the state individual kind of heading that up. Very great guy. Just had a lot of vision of what we wanted to do and what we could do with this program. One thing we found out was very labor intensive for the staff. That year, I think we had like 250 applications. I mean, we really promoted this. It was kind of fun because we actually had town hall meetings all over the county. I remember having them in Riceville and Cresco and Elma and Lime Springs, just to get the word out and say, hey, this is a new way of looking at what we do at conservation here in Howard County. I think we ended up with close to, golly, I think we were close to 120 contracts that first sign up that we got into. But it was a lot of work, and the agency kind of figured out how to streamline a lot of this because we had a lot of people that got detailed, which is federal employees from other parts of the state would come spend a week with us. They'd find we had the little kind of like an Airbnb where a lot of the people stayed, or a hotel, and they'd come and help us with all the processing of all these applications. But it looked at so much stuff. I mean, we were looking at people's nutrient levels and how much fertilizer per farm and the things that they were doing.
Mm-hmm. And these aren't just 1-year contracts either. I mean, these are 3 to 5 year contracts. So
no, these are all 5. They were 5 or 10 to begin with. They were
so even 10-year contracts.
They were 10. Yeah, they were 10.
So, I mean, when you're talking about consistency and keeping things rolling over the years, it's not like it's just a one-time deal where they're doing it and they're done. I mean,
correct.
These guys were having to basically jump in and really buy into the program and buy into the practices they were doing, which is really sometimes to get them over that hump what you got to do. I mean, we see a lot of people do the state cost share for a year. They give this a try maybe without cost share, and then they don't come back and do it. But then if you can commit someone to 5 years, they have to commit to it. Once you get someone to commit to it, a lot of times they're going to stick with it, and they're going to make sure to figure out how it works. They're going to make sure they're finding ways that it's then profitable for their operation, and it keeps on continuing down then.
Well, when it's just like any other new conservation practice or anything on a farm, you have to stick with it for a while before it really sticks. And the opportunity for farmers to learn more about their own operation, I think, was probably the magical part of this whole program. Was you would not believe how many people prior to this, one of the requirements was they had to have a soil test done. And there was people that we were just getting them in under the wire. It's like, you got to hurry up and get your soil test done. And that in itself was a lot of information people were gathering that they hadn't. They were getting all their information from, that's their business, but they were getting it from the agronomists who work for elevators who sell fertilizer. I mean, we had some people that we were finding out they were putting on 300 plus pounds of nitrogen a year and applying manure and all this kind of stuff. It was kind of hard in that first round because a lot of the livestock people, they never had their manure analyzed, and that was one thing that they had to have an analysis of their manure that they were applying. So that it kind of got a reputation as being not friendly to the livestock people, but we got a handle on that. And it's just like anything else. It's just like cover crops or anything else. Once you develop that market for what needs to be done, it's amazing that the co-ops and different places offer those services now. But anyway, back to the program. So we had a lot of people sign up their farms. Right off the bat, there was 3 main things. Is you had to have a baseline for your nutrients, so you had to have those soil tests done. And I think we required them at that time. Every 10 acres had to have a soil test. You had to have all your ephemeral gully erosion under control on your farm, and they'd give you like a year to do it. So if let's say somebody came in and they got 3 farms, we'd sit down and we'd go through each farm, and clearly you can see a lot of this erosion right on there. And we'd ask the farmer, hey, does this look like erosion? And instantly we would sign them up for, they could just seed it down on their own. I think we only had 2 people that did that. They just went out with a drill and did the bare minimum, but life is about either doing the bare minimum or doing it the right way. But anyway, so most of the people were getting CRP waterways put in, state cost share waterways reworked, things like that. The third thing was they needed some wildlife habitat. There had to be something out there. And it was kind of neat because you could have 3 farms, several miles apart, and you had to have so much live habitat. So let's say on one farm you had 5 acres of non-crop, it had some shrubs and stuff on it. We had to calculate, you had to have a certain percentage for all your farms. So we would draw this line on our map from that farm to the other 2 and then kind of calculate it out. So if we were short a half an acre, we'd put it into a program. Well, some of these 160 acres, it was just corn and soybean rotations. There was no cricks. There's nothing on there. Lo and behold, here came the CP33 program, which was the coil buffer. Just happened to drop on our laps that season, and if people needed that habitat for wildlife, well, there it was. You could do 160 acre field, do one side of the field 60-foot wide, 120-foot wide. So anyway, there was three aspects of the conservation end: having your soil test analysis, having those gullies, ephemeral gullies under control, and then adding some wildlife habitat to it.
And then correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that like with these gullies and stuff like that, say they got a gully going through, they could implement a CRP grass waterway, use a CRP program, but still get credit for taking care of their
Yeah.
gullies
Yep.
through CSP.
Yeah. And that was great. It just was a wonderful instrument. It was that carrot. So we were offering, and then we also had caps. It was a $40,000 to $45,000 per contract per year. So if you had a 10-year contract, I mean that's close to $500,000. But it depends. If you had a lot of farms, I mean it kind of. We had some very large farms that did it, and they maxed out pretty quickly. But some of the smaller farms, they could do more things. They call them enhancements. So you could do more things to kind of build that per acre payment up. And I think most of them were landing in that probably 30 to 40, $50 an acre. And that's pretty good because primarily it was, and the reason I liked CSP with the stewardship in there is because it was a stewardship payment. The security, what we call it now, is more, security in my mind has more of a financial security, which is good too. But stewardship, I thought, had a better ring to it as far as inclusive to all the aspects of what a farmer was doing. And so we had these caps on there. So and then we had a couple different people that maxed out on it. Fathers, sons would each have a contract, that kind of stuff, which is fine. But it did limit some of the bigger farmers to where we wanted to really do some big changes. So now the limits have risen over time. And but yeah, we had a huge interest in it. It was a big splash, big rollout, and we really jumped on it. And that's the reason Howard County has been right in that top 5 counties ever since the program was first initiated. And through the years, it's been better than other times. So then we got through the first 5 years, and then people had an option at that 5-year time to extend it to a 10-year contract. Or I'm trying to think, I think you could have started out right off the bat with a 10-year, but it was a longer commitment, but it was a better payment. There were some pretty good incentives to do it. And then we went into a phase where they saw how many hours it took to put these contracts together, staff time. Then they went to this thing called self-certification, and it went from a very supervised, very intensive on our end to something that was pretty wide open. And are you doing it? Yep. And kind of went that way. But now we've kind of come back the other way. And even in the last 4 or 5 years, it didn't seem like it was doing that great because we've been transitioning a lot of people into the cover crop program. And for a while there, the cover crop was just kind of a token thing that you could do with the CSP, whereas EQIP was the meat and potatoes of the program for getting. So we had a lot of people that just kind of decided to let their CSP contracts expire, and there wasn't a whole lot of new stuff that was really enticing to get them back in. So we flipped a lot of people to EQIP. Well, now the pendulum has swung not for the EQIP program, which is still great and it's getting better every year, but it has swung back towards CSP is now much more enticing to people to participate.
I mean, just because of the rules is a lot of the reason why it's starting to swing back. With EQIP, we were able to do a single species or a multi-species, which is 2. Well, once you get to that multi-species in EQIP, now you're ineligible to continue down and do anymore. Well, now we can put you into CSP, and we can do a 3-species or a 4-species mix. So we could do 5 years in EQIP at a single, then do another 5 years in EQIP at the multi-species, and then transition you over into CSP, do the 3-species, and then maybe if everything all works out, do a 4-species mix there with CSP. So really, we could get you 20 years worth of program payments. But obviously, once you got into CSP, you got to pick up a few more enhancements, which 95% of those guys are probably already doing something that's going to elevate them and rank them high enough to get picked up in that program.
Well, one of the nice things they did, and they just instituted this a couple years ago, is talking about making sure you had those ephemeral gully erosion taken care of. They now have a CSP payment for repairing those waterways. We've had a couple people do those, and it's for either putting brand new ones in through the CSP program or for reworking what they already have. And so that's kind of nice too. So we don't have to like jump over all into all the different programs, and it has a pretty substantial payment for getting that stuff done. One requirement with that is we want to make sure that you're crossing those waterways. So especially in Howard County, we got a lot of wet land. We want to make sure that we put tile in it. So that is one of the requirements. Is we're going to have to put those 2 lines of tile alongside of it just to keep that waterway dry, so you can cross it. So yeah, it's
Which is a no-brainer. I mean, why would you not let us try to help incentivize and give you some cost share to putting more tile in your farm? I mean,
yeah. I mean, we want these waterways to be functional. So that brings us back to the whole idea of this 3 and 4 species, because we've had a lot of farmers, starting especially with my watershed project. We had a driftless pot of money for cover crops, and that was about 7 years ago. And those contracts were for 3 and 5 years. Well, we did most of those 3 years first with a single species of cereal rye, and then we upped the payment and upped the requirement to a multi-species. So a multi in government eyes is one more than one. So we went to 2 species. So we were throwing radish and turnips and stuff like that into our mix. And well, we've got a lot of people that have converted into they've bought onto the whole soil health and really are liking the cover crop. Well, they've got through the EQIP program to where there's nothing more to advance at that program. Well, lo and behold, here CSP, because now we've got all these people falling off the bus. Not really, but in our mind, we want to take people to the next level, and that was what CSP. You start here, take you to the next level, take you to the next level. Well, here we had like plateaued out, and CSP wasn't really doing it. EQIP, people were starting to become ineligible for the program. We had all these people buying onto it, and now with soil health and a lot of what the studies and things that have been going on with it is multi-species is definitely now what you want. We're trying to get away from, we're trying to imitate nature, and naturally you don't go out. The prairie didn't have one area just big blue stem, one area just black-eyed Susans. I mean, it has a multiple root system. All these exudates that come through the roots, the more you have, the better. So now we've got this whole, I think there's like 9 different ways you can use cover crops as an enhancement. They came out with this memo a couple weeks ago. And honestly, I could be right even in here, and I didn't really realize that they had this little sideline. But they introduced this about a year ago, but they came out just the last couple weeks ago reiterating this, explaining it a little better with a handout. And I'm like, holy smokes, here we finally got our entry level into the next, taking people to the next level. And obviously multi-species is definitely going to be the way to go. And now we have a vehicle to take them there. And it'll be a 5-year contract, which is not only a 5-year contract, it's a 5-year commitment. And Hunter and I go to a lot of conferences and a lot of speakers and people that have been doing this a long time, and watching people accept new ways of doing things takes a while. It takes between 5 and 10 years for people to change their behaviors. We've had a pretty accelerated rate of change here in Howard County, but we want to keep that change going, and we want to keep people committed to it. And this new scenario with going to the 3+ species is pretty neat, because the other side of it is we've got some new cover crop species coming onto play, because like I said, a lot of people have found out about this whole multi-species soil health aspect. One of them that is winter camelina, which I'm going to be very interested to even see what this plant looks like. I don't know if Hunter can explain. He's probably seen pictures of it.
It's more of like a. I like to explain. It's more of like a head of lettuce when you start to see it above ground. It's got a pretty leafy plant above there, and so the way we kind of understood it, and the way we kind of heard from other folks is, um, it was a lower application rate, so you were able to use different application methods to get it on. For example, drones was the
Mm-hmm.
main reason. You could use a drone to put it on, being it was only like 4 pounds an acre that needed to be seeded, and it didn't get that tall, thick, stemmy growth like rye.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of the problems we were running into with some of our rye stuff was it was getting put on quite early. It was getting with really favorable conditions. It was getting anywhere from a foot to 2 foot tall in the fall,
Mm-hmm.
which then take that almost double in the springtime. It got to be a lot of material to try to work through, and so we kind of thought this winter camelina might be another option to try, just because it wasn't going to grow near as tall. It's going to stay in that 4 to 6, maybe 8 inches tall, and it's going to be a lot more. It's not going to be near as tough to be able to work through as far
Mm-hmm.
as a no-till drill and stuff like that.
Because a lot of what we're doing with the soil health is what you can't see. It's with the root systems, and although you've got that upper bulky material that could probably add a little bit more to organic material, but honestly, the roots is where the organics come from. So when the prairie was here, obviously the prairie had extensive root system. That's how we built the big black, the really rich black soil in the Midwest is because of that root system. So here we go. We got this new, science is complete. I mean, this came out so quickly last year that I was at first I had to learn how to pronounce it, camelina, and then just to see what it looked like, and then we're like out there promoting it. We haven't even seen it grow before, but we did a lot of research on it as far as like pictorial stuff like that. But like I
Well,
said, it'll be interesting to see it in
yeah.
actual
The way I always
growth.
kind of try to explain like the multi-species thing, and I mean, obviously most people are putting dollar amounts and what the cost of the mix is going to be and stuff like that. But I like to explain it as it's like a buffet. I mean, if you're going to go to a buffet somewhere, you don't want to see just one food on there. You want to see an array of different things so you can try a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this. It's the same sort of thing with the soil. I mean, the soil is not looking for just that one plant to be growing there, to be able to have all those microbes and fungi eating just that one. They want to see multiple different things.
Mhm.
That's going to help their diet, and it's going to help them grow and do what they need to be doing underground there. And it's the same kind of concept as far as having multiple different things growing. I mean, we don't want to just have one species there.
Well, and that's the nice thing about CSP. You've got all these multiple angles. Nutrient management. Okay, so we're doing these soil tests. So the people you've got this. So then you're sitting down with your agronomist and you're not going to apply more nutrient than what Iowa State recommends. We've got a lot more tests going on. Iowa State's doing a lot of tests as far as, for, more is better. That was always the thought. Well, not always. Return on investment is what you got to look at. So let's say you're looking to produce 250 bushel corn, and they're recommending 175 pounds of nitrogen to get to that point because you're taking credits for soybeans and some of the other things. But you always think, oh, in the back of my mind, it's like, well, if 175 pounds is good, 200 pounds, 225 pounds, it's got to be better. It'll raise it. But it's like a bell curve. You can only get to your soil is only going to produce so much at this point in time with genetics. And then you're starting to, go off the other way with the return on investment. You may still see an increase in yield, but how much did it cost you to get that increase in yield? And I've seen a lot of people say instead of having yield monitors, we should have return on investment monitors to show, well, what, you got 260 bushel corn there, but what did it actually cost you? You may have been better off at raising 220 bushel corn and you would have had a much better return on investment. But anyway, so we're getting a lot better handle on that nutrient management, which with Hunter and I, especially Hunter's project, the Water Quality Initiative, we're trying to meet those goals of the nutrient reduction strategy, which is totally based on nutrients. So especially Hunter's project is totally based on it. Mine is a side note, but it's primarily reducing bacteria because of my funding source. But that's important. That's very important with what our goals with the nutrient reduction strategy is. So it's playing perfectly into that line. And then the habitat thing, that's really changed through the years. I mean, we went from just adding some CRP to an edge of a field to where people could leave some standing crop at the end of the year for livestock or for wildlife, and I still see that. That's still a practice you can do.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of neat. People leave some of that standing corn next to a timber or a prairie area. So that's one aspect of it. The We did so then the whole pollinator thing came into play here a few years ago, and talk about up and down. When that first came out, we had one individual got a contract for it, and it's one of those things is you look at it and you're just like, that can't be it. It's way it's a 5-year contract. How can they pay that much per acre? And wow, it was true. It was like, it was amazingly, it was an insane amount of money per acre. But it's just like anything else. You get these odd things that come out. Not sure if that was their intent when they first did it, but it doesn't take very long. They figure out, well, we spent way too much money on that, where we could do it a different way. So then that program kind of, the pollinator stuff with the CSP kind of declined a little bit. It's still pretty good. Not as lucrative as that first time around, but see, our habitat for wildlife expanded, beyond turkey and pheasants and deer to where we had monarchs and bees and things like that involved. Yeah, what are some of the other enhancements that you can do with CSP?
I remember when I first got started here, one of the enhancements was deer-friendly fence. And I was kind of seeing, I was like, what the
Yeah,
heck
we're
is
gonna have to
this?
talk about some of these things that you kind of have to scratch your head
Yeah,
on.
and all it was basically you had to put a little white marker, basically, is what it was on your fence. Well, I don't know if it was kosher or what, but all of a sudden you started seeing all these fairway sacks tied onto fences. I guess it
The,
worked.
the best one that we figured on for this deer-friendly fence was we would have them cut pieces. Was it siding? Vinyl
Well,
siding
siding would
or
work,
steel
yeah.
siding? Anyway, and it had kind of a neat little clip
Like a
area that
two
you
by
could,
two.
yeah, and you put these little pieces of metal and you clamp them on. I remember one of our farmers, he had his 2 sons go out there and spent probably 2 weeks putting these on their fences because I don't know, I guess I see a lot of deer hung up in barbed wire fences, but that one kind of like, all right, deer friendly
We no
fences, all
longer
right.
have that one.
That no longer is a, although it hasn't been that long ago, somebody brought pictures in of their little clips of stuff.
We used that one
One
for
was
the last 5
recycling
years.
oil, used engine oil, which I found that kind of interesting. It's like, well, what were the farmers doing with their used oil before? I mean, obviously using it to lubricate some chains. I know when as a kid we always put it on our manure spreaders because we had a wood bottom in it, and you put that on there and kind of preserve the wood on it. But I don't think we were having a lot of farmers who were just out back 40 dumping oil. So then they could take it to a reclamation site. I think we finally did get it acceptable where you could, some of these places that burn used oil for heating, that could be a receipt for it. Otherwise, you had to take it to the recycling center over by Charles City. We got a receipt. So that was one of them that was interesting. We had the birdhouse one. That one was okay. They had to put up, mostly it was bluebird houses that they were putting up. Then we had the bat houses. We were putting bat houses up. These are small things, but so let's get back to the program. Kind of like Equip, well, not kind of like Equip, just like Equip. It goes through a ranking process. So what Hunter and I do, we're out there talking to our producers in our watersheds, and we're, telling them about this program, telling them all the benefits, talking about the financial reward for doing some of these things, and how their farming operation is eligible for it. Which, first off, having those discussions, going out to the farm and visiting with its farmers, I mean, it's not like you get on the phone and say, hey, I got a program here, do you want to sign up? That's not how it works. I mean, your success rate on that's going to be pretty much nil. So what's really nice is what Riley Wilson and I were doing last week, and Hunter's been starting working on that too, is going out, talking to the farmers, because a few of these farmers, we had them kind of shy away from the CSP and get into Equip because that's where the cover crop program was emphasized on. Now we're telling those people, it's like, well, now we're kind of, it's just like government, wait 10 minutes and it'll change. And kind of like Iowa weather. And so now, but it's really nice sitting down with the farmer and, talking about their operation and seeing where these things will fit in. And man, we've just had tremendous reactions from those that we've talked to. I know, I've been getting text messages. You get as you're leaving, they say thank you for coming out and let us know about this. Because honestly, that's what our job is. I mean, you're the taxpayers. You guys are paying us to research this stuff to bring it to you. So it's not like we're going to keep it a secret. We got a lot of contracts here, so we're definitely not keeping it a secret. So I just wish there was more time in the day where we could sit down with every farmer. So a lot of what we do, if we have a good reaction with that farmer and they have a good experience, it's word of mouth. I mean, if the word gets out that it's a pain in the neck to do some of this stuff, we're not going to get many takers.
Well, and the thing I like about CSP so much is the list of enhancements that you can do is a mile long. I mean,
Oh.
it's nearly impossible for us as employees who are trying to administer the program to know all the different enhancements. I mean, there's tons of them. But that's what's cool about it is a farmer can come in and say, well, hey, let me look at this, and he can take a quick 5-minute glance at it and can probably pick out 20 things that he could do.
Yeah.
Whether they're going to do all those or not, that's up to them. But there's a ton of things that they can do, and at least give them a lot of options out there.
So kind of like Equip, we have it's a continuous sign up, but we have certain deadlines which they pick up, and then that's for the next round. Well, CSP, you've probably heard in the news over the last year or so. It started out with the infrastructure bill that was passed last December, and then we had the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed earlier this year, and then, well, I should say last year now that we're in 2023. And then our regular funding for USDA programs. Well, anyway, it's put a tremendous amount of money into the USDA budget. So, big part of CSP, reducing tillage. That was another thing. Actually, I totally skipped that. That was another part of it. Is they come up with this thing. It's called the STIR rating, which I think that's a pretty good acronym. I'm not really sure what it stands for, but STIR. Think of stirring the soil. We want to have the least amount of stirring going on. So reducing that STIR rating. So, and that's all based on tillage. So if you were, let's say you were moldboard plowing and you went to double disking and soil finishing, there's a reduction in your STIR. You've gone from chisel plowing to just disking your stalks once in the spring. That's a reducing that. Let's say you were doing fall tillage. Now you're going to move it to spring. That's a reduction in the STIR rate. I mean, it's like one of those things that's taking people from high disturbance to lower disturbance. Part of this is carbon sequestration, and soil is the best way to sequester carbon. Carbon is something that gets released into the atmosphere and causes kind of havoc on that end of things. But our farmland is one of the biggest ways that we can do that, and the best way is obviously native prairie grasses, because they actually take carbon out of the air, carbon dioxide, fix it into the soil with their roots. Secondly is every time you do tillage, you're releasing more carbon. So when you release carbon, what it is it's the organic material that break down, and then it releases that. So the more organic material we can put in the soil. Now this is what CSP is directing us towards. It's to increase your organic matter in your soil. By increased organic matter, you're going to have water retention ability. You're going to have permeability. That water going into it's going to hold it kind of like a sponge. I mean, if you've got a, we have these demonstrations where we have rain simulators and stuff. So let's say we've got this sterile soil because all we've been doing is putting commercial fertilizers that, they have the chemical makeup of what it is, but it's got no organic material in it. And you've fried the soil down to the point where it's just, geology, which, okay, we're going to talk about soil health. I've been kind of urging Hunter to do this lately, but we're kind of touching a little bit. We got to stop looking at soil with the geologist glasses, and look at it with a biologist glasses. And that's where, for decades, from the time we had the Dust Bowl of the 30s and 40s to where everything came in, it was all about soil and the makeup of the soil. But now they're finding out the biology of the soil is even more important. But anyway, you create this organic material, it holds onto the soil, it holds on to that moisture. It also is good, it helps feed that microbiology in the soil. And then the having the microbiology in the soil helps those little creatures that live in that, amoebas and things like that. They are able to digest things in the soil to take those minerals and turn them into soluble minerals, P and K and nitrogen for the plant to use. So hey, I snuck in a little soil health in there on you. But anyway, that's another big part of a CSP, and that's why I've always liked it. That's why I've been promoting it for years at my project coordinator meetings. You mentioned CSP, and everybody's just, oh yeah, that's a pain to run. No, it's an awesome program because it's having that dialogue with the farmer. We're talking about multiple aspects of their farming operation, and we're getting a handle on the nutrient reduction and strategy. It all goes hand in hand, plus soil health. I mean, you couldn't have, all this stuff is just like a perfect storm. It's all evolved in the last, 15 years. I mean, think of how long the USDA and SCS before that, and now NRCS has been around, and now we're finally figuring this out. Hunter and Riley and I were just at this soil health conference down in Cedar Falls here last month, and the science is starting to back up all this stuff. So back to CSP, there was one aspect they call it the Haney test, where you go in. What they're doing is they're actually measuring the microbiology effects on the soil. It's almost like you got to start thinking of soil as being a living being. Too long we've just thought of it as a medium to plant crops into, and it really isn't. And that Haney test is what that's doing. It's collecting the respiration of the soil, and the respiration is not going to happen unless you have restored that soil health, and you've got the microbiology happening, you got the organics increasing, and that kind of stuff. So there's the aspect of what CSP is doing for soil health, and you can't. And just like I said, the nutrient management. So anyway, I was back to talking to these project coordinators. I said, how many of you are spending money out of your watershed projects for nutrient management? And like half the crowd raised their hands. I'm like, oh man. It's like, here we've got a program that's got it built in. You get these people on the CSP train, they're already doing it. I have yet to spend $1 in, close to, probably 18 years I've been working on projects. I have yet to spend $1 of my watershed project money on nutrient management, because since CSP came out, there's no reason to, because it's already built in. So they're spinning their wheels on a lot of stuff, and it's paying for a lot of things that they wouldn't have to if we would just have that dialogue with the farmer and get them on the whole CSP bus ride and take them.
And where CSP is going nowadays, and it just came out, is like the program right now. If you do a 5-year contract, you're finishing that 5 years, you now have the chance to opt in for a renewal, which basically gives you a free pass, not have to go compete with all the other guys. You do what you've already done, plus pick up some new stuff. And we had a few guys who didn't want to do it, or they maybe weren't sure, and they went through all the ranking. All of a sudden, USDA said, hey, actually, you need to go back through everyone who had a contract and redo it again, because they're going to get picked up. Well, all that was not a free pass, but pretty close to a free pass to say, hey, you're going to skip over all these hundreds of applications, and you're going to go right back in as is with a few other things. And so now we're going from a 5-year contract to the 10-year contract like we talked about, and they're continuing down that path of success rather than having to completely start over.
And that was a big part of what CSP was about. Is it was supposed to be that opportunity at certain junctures, at least every 5 years, to sit and reassess what have we been doing. You're doing these Haney tests. You're supposed to be seeing these improvements, and I think that's a big part of where, it takes a lot of time to sit down and really explain this, and staffing wise and things like that, there's a lot of stuff falling off the shelf when, coming off the tracks, because we weren't sitting down and explaining that. I tell you what, when we sit down and we talk about the soil health and what the impact is, dollar amounts and an invoice for, hey, I just spent, several $1,000s on cover crop. What did it get me? You got to get beyond that. And that's something that, that's our job. Our job is to explain what it is that you're getting for that cover crop invoice price. It's the increase in soil health, it's the increase in soil water absorption, There's such a multiple amount of stuff. It's more than just, hey, you paid $29 an acre for cover crops. What did it get me? It got you a lot, and it got you a lot more than what you're thinking, because we've got all this stuff that's playing into it. Just the one we had uh, it was kind of like an agronomist, but he was like a soil, well, I would call him a soil scientist, because he was talking about the nutrients in the soil and how much nutrients are in the soil. There's a lot of potassium, there's a lot of phosphorus, there's a lot of nitrogen, but it's tied up in forms that the plant can't use. So here we go. We've got the soil that's got hundreds of pounds of these nutrients, N, P, and K, and here we come along, we add more onto it. Well, that's why we have a lot of this excess nutrient running off, because we're adding the form that the plant can use, and the plant can only use so much. And what happens when it doesn't use it? It's going to leach down through the soil. It's going to run off, and that's one aspect where cover crops play a big role in holding on to that stuff. But by increasing your soil health, increasing that microbiology in the soil, those microbes, they've been around here a lot longer than we have with our with our yield monitors. They're the small animals and things in the soil, and the plants, the fungi and some of that stuff. It is pulling that nutrient, the forms that are not usable for the plant. Those fungi and those things are like making that stuff available to the root for your next growing season. I mean, it's like I said, it's a perfect storm. And every year that goes by, there's more studies, there's more research, there's more data to back this stuff up. And it's going to make Hunter and my job easier, because now we're going to have actual data to show. But man, we were flying in the dark there for flying blind when we first started out with a lot of this stuff, because it's kind of take it as a wish and a prayer that this is going to work. And now what's so awesome about it is we're getting all this data. So back to the whole multi-species thing with CSP. So we got wind of this. Hunter alluded to a little bit ago about these people that passed on a renewal. So there's a lot of money being put into the USDA budget. It's for whether, however we got it, and we're going to use it. We're going to use it to benefit the water improvement, water quality improvement. We're going to do it to improve soil health, and we're going to do our best to get as much of that money, get as many people on that CSP train, and a lot of people having that dialogue to find out how that is going to benefit you more than the $30 or $40 an acre that you're going to receive. A lot of times I say, the financial end of it sells a lot of conservation. Well, that's kind of an easy answer. Now we've got to, we're getting the data. Now it's our job to explain beyond that initial dollar amount that you're receiving, how much benefit it's getting. And some of that is, if you thought you could go out and buy soil health off a shelf, I think you're going to be paying a lot more than $29.99 an acre for it.
Well, and one thing I like to kind of think about it as is, I think farmers have a pretty good soft spot for sustainability, future generations to come back on the farm and work that way. Well, that's exactly what we're trying to do here, is create a sustainable system or process for that individual farmer, so that they're able to continue to farm down the line, have productive soil, be able to have enough revenue and money coming in that they can continue to do what they love to do and have a profitable lifestyle. And that's exactly what we're trying to promote here. It's not just, here's $50 an acre to return back and make $55 an acre. That's not exactly it. We're trying to create that completely sustainable future where hopefully down the line they're not having to plug in X amount of dollars of inputs just to get X amount back. And so, I feel like you can get that light switch flipped with some of these guys and make them understand that, hey, we're trying to build a future for the future is what we're really trying to do, and not just input, output.
So, you go around the state of Iowa, and a county that, Hunter and I are aware of is Washington County, down in southeast Iowa, South Iowa City. And they have been pioneers in this soil health journey. They were promoting soil health before soil health was cool. They were doing cover crops, they were doing no-till. At this soil health conference we were at, Mitchell Hora was one of the speakers, kind of moderators for one of the sessions. His father and people down in that Washington County area, I've met them years ago, and they were talking about this 30 years ago, even before I was in conservation. They were talking about all this, and I remember going to field days, when we started talking about the minimal till and stuff. But anyway, Washington County is a county that we've always kind of kept our eyes on because they do tremendous work down there. They had a watershed, Lake Darling, that when one of the first years I was project coordinator, they had Stan was his name, and I believe he was a retired DC, and became a project coordinator. He had so much energy and just so, such forethought, but they had really latched on to the whole reduced tillage, cover crops, and all that kind of stuff, besides waterways, terraces, and all that kind of grade stabilizations. But so Washington County is one of those counties that always is going to stick out on the map as far as really being excited about it. But they were almost too far ahead on the curve that, they've got a lot of people that are doing this on their own and firm committers. But we're, Hunter and I were kind of playing catch up here, doing a good job of it. But, we still got to get the people across the finish line. And if that takes having a contract, that's what we're going to do. Like I said, it puts people a commitment. So, state programs are fine and dandy. It's a 1-year commitment. 1 year you do it, and then that means Hunter and I go out and we're rounding this up again. But if you get people on that 3 to 5 year commitment with cover crops, with EQIP, and you get these people in the commitment with the CSP for 5 to 10 years, I mean, that frees our time up to go visit with the other people. So these are our examples of what's going on in the watershed and what they're doing on their farm. So then we can focus on the people that are on the fence, literally on the fence line, to jump on board and start doing this and implementing, or even go back, back in time where they're just trying out cover crops for the first time. So I mean, it's a wonderful way of keeping people on that path to soil health and that program. And CSP and that's why I've always said for many years that CSP is the program to go. And now it's really living back up to its reputation. It's filling a void here that the EQIP program kind of left us with. And I know I'm excited about it. I know we just like I said, I just got wind of this memo a little over a week ago, and I've just been going gangbusters on talking to as many farmers. So, like we said, we have these it's a continuous sign up, kind of like CRP, although each fiscal year, they have a cutoff. Well, typically it's around that October 1st for EQIP and CSP. So you're going to see Hunter and I just, running around crazy with all these applications, and in September, try to start in August so that we're not bugging people when they're trying to harvest. But anyway, because that program does have so much money, and that's why they funded all the renewals in the state of Iowa, and there's still a pile of money that needs to be obligated. So that's created a great opportunity to have these discussions and conversations with farmers again, to say, hey, you need to take a second look at CSP. You might have been in it, 10, 15 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, even 2 years ago, and you passed on it. Well, guess what? It's back. It's got some neat enhancements. They've got the money to back it up, and if you're interested, we've definitely got a program for you.
Mm-hmm. And I know we'll be putting out a postcard here pretty soon about it. We can make a lot of phone calls. We can stop at a lot of farmsteads, but there's always people out either on vacation. Mm-hmm. They're getting stuff done in the fields. They're doing this and doing that, and so we miss them. And so sometimes sending that postcard out where they can kind of sit down and think about it for a little bit, and then be able to strike when the iron's hot that way.
I always like to say we're planting the seed. You get that postcard. It's honestly, and there's like I said, we've been to enough conferences and talking about salesmanship skills. You have to saturate your market. So we're going to saturate the watersheds with information about the CSP program, information about the EQIP program, and talking about that soil health aspect and how that translates back into improved water quality. It's an easy connecting the dots on this is pretty darn easy. So we're going to saturate our watersheds with the initial work. We're going to be having some phone calls out just to set up times to visit with them at their farm, because it's like it'd be like selling encyclopedias. Why do you think they call it selling door to door? It's not phone to phone. You don't sell anything on the phone, and it drives me crazy when we get these, go to some of these meetings, and in the past, and we had project coordinators, they're just struggling, and it's like, we just can't sell anything. I've been on the phone for weeks and nobody's returned. Yeah, it's called door to door salesmanship skills. So anyway, we're gonna be doing that. I got off my little soapbox there. We'll be doing that and just having that conversation, because the next deadline is in March. So they gave us a second deadline. So we had October was our initial. We really worked it for EQIP. Not that we're not still signing people for EQIP too, because there's still programs with energy, cover crops, ag waste, and all that kind of stuff. We're working on those. But especially the CSP program, we're going to definitely get out there, get a lot of applications in the system and see where it lays. Because like I said, it's a ranking program. It all depends on how many applicants there are in the state for each of these pools, and for those enhancements, you'll get a ranking score, and then they just start going up that list, and as money becomes available, and for whatever reason, if someone on the list is offered a contract, they give so much time to think about it. If they pass on it, then they go up to the next number, or next number, next number. So we'll have multiple times we'll get an email. It works with EQIP too. You'll get an email. It's like, oh, here they have another batching date. They had another batch of applications that got ranked, and then we're like, oh, look, Howard County got 4 more. Howard County got 8 more. So that's always kind of exciting. And so at that point, that's when the rubber meets the road, and that's when the farmer needs to make a decision. Do I want to go forward? Applications. There's no reason not to sign an application. It doesn't commit you to anything. But if you don't have an application, you're not getting anything, because you have to have an application to get into the system. We're not just going to say, hey, so-and-so is kind of interested in, let's rank this out. No, it doesn't work that way. You're not going to get a contract unless you have an application. And that's another thing I talk to these project coordinators. It's like, you can whine and complain if your county doesn't have any contracts. Well, whose fault was that? You got to get out. You got to promote the program, spark that interest, get the application signed and entered. You're not going to get anything if you don't have an application. Howard County was fortunate enough to be picked up for a pilot program a year ago for cover crop. The 4 counties were picked in the state, and the reason being, they had a pile of money left over. And did they go to a county that didn't have any applications in the drawer? No. We had 200 applications that hadn't been funded yet in the drawer, and we ended up obligating over $1 million worth of contracts, because we had done our homework. We had talked to the farmer, piqued their interest, got an application in the drawer, so that when the time came to with the money, it's the chicken and the egg thing. You're not going to get a chick if you don't have an egg. So anyway, that's kind of our thing. So that's what we're going to be doing here in the next couple weeks. Well, actually, the next couple months. Like Hunter said, we kind of got busy here during the holiday season with a lot of different things wrapping up. End of year, we're still working on getting those last cover crop invoices in from this fall. We had a big push to make sure that we got our state cost share applicants lined up, so that on January 1, those leftover dollars in the state become available to those have shovel ready projects. So we had December was a big push on getting that done. So now we're going to be focusing on reports. I know I have a big EPA report coming up. Riley's been helping me with that. And of course our quarterly reports. So
Awesome. Well, I think we hit on about everything.
I think
there.
so.
I mean, that's what we talked about, and we'll say
That's
it again.
CSP in a nutshell.
Yeah. I mean, excuse me, it's all inclusive. It goes anywhere from below the soil to above the soil, and much more. So we'll definitely be out there, whether you're interested or not. We're going to definitely be itching at you and be trying to educate as much as we can. So give us a like, give us a subscribe, share out our podcasts, help us out whatever way we can, because we're going to do everything we can do to help you guys out. So thanks for tuning in again for another episode of Beyond the Dirt podcast.